Reforms in Syria have become tangible realities on the ground that cannot be ignored. They are ongoing despite the attempts by those who are outside our country to curtail and hinder these reforms by various means. Madam President, no state can claim that it is more desirous to guarantee the safety and security of our citizens. Since the unfortunate and painful events in our country, we have strived to guarantee the security and safety of each citizen. We have also endeavored to continue the provision of basic services, food and medicine without delay, despite the hasty imposition of economic sanctions which were imposed unilaterally outside international consensus against my country. As we strive to stand against Israeli and Western hegemony against my country. These measures were used as pressure to bear on the Syrian population and their livelihoods. This is why resorting to the so-called humanitarian situation is only a pretext to intervene in our domestic affairs in a harmful way to our leaders and our country, in the interest of external political agendas that have nothing to do with the desire to promote the humanitarian situation in Syria. Syria received delegations from OCHA and a delegation from the International Committee of the Red Cross, presided by the chairman of the committee, who met our President Bashar al-Assad. They found for themselves the provocation and incitement and propaganda by certain circles to deform the facts. Madam President, certain council members tried of late to intervene in our domestic affairs under the pretext of protection of civilians. Here we only wonder, where have you been? Why didn't you protect civilians in Palestine, the occupied Syrian Golan, southern Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya, when their citizens were beleaguered by crimes against humanity and crimes of war? Isn't it interesting that the delegate of France on the 14th of July this year, isn't it interesting that he extended thanks to Israel for its aggressive actions against Syria in 2007? Don't you consider that an encouragement to and promotion of aggression? Isn't it against all the customs of the international community and all the ethics that reject the might as a solution? The international legal framework governing international relations is based on the principle of non-interference in the domestic affairs of states. It has been enshrined in a myriad of international instruments, chief among them the Charter of the United Nations. Therefore, the calls by certain circles to topple the legitimate government in Syria is an incitement, irresponsible incitement, in order to undermine the stability of Syria, encouraging the radical demands of the opposition in Syria to topple the government by arms, violence, and terrorists is a coup from outside our country, and it is not reform. Don't you think that the political declaration by certain leaders of countries on this council that the Syrian president has lost his legitimacy and therefore he should step down? Don't you think that this is a blatant breach of international law and the Charter of the United Nations? Isn't this tantamount to hindrance of national reforms by inciting the Syrian people on the streets against the legitimate Syrian leadership? These are questions that we leave to you to answer. Madam President, we are hopeful that the United Nations and its member states will be of assistance to Syria to face up to attempts of terrorism and extremism and instability. Hasty positions should not be used as a cover-up for political pressure to encourage armed extremist groups. Here we wish to confirm that the intervention by the Security Council in the domestic Syrian affairs further worsens the situation, sends a message to extremists and terrorists that their action of sabotage, deliberate sabotage and violence are supported by the Security Council, actions that no country can be lenient to. Madam President, Syria, similar to other member states of this organization, including member states of this august council, have problems that need reform. If there is anybody here who has no problems and needs no reform, they can cast a stone on us. If the greedy objectives of our enemies inside this council and outside this council have been fulfilled elsewhere at a price of stability, security, safety of other countries, I can underscore that Syria will stand adamant against any plot targeting its sovereignty, independence, and its stability, as well as its independent political decisions. Therefore, we reject the maneuvers of the sponsors of this draft resolution, which have just failed. These maneuvers that attack my country and its stature in the international arena. The strength, or rather prestige, is more important than might. The sponsors of this draft resolution lost their prestige, and now they have resorted to might and power, for they lost the respect of the majority of member states of this organization. In this conduct, they are undermining international legality, and they are leading the whole world into a new colonial era and military adventures that are bound and doomed to failure. These very states led the whole world to 2 world wars, claimed millions of lives on our planet. They caused untold suffering for millions in Asia, Africa, and Latin America due to their colonial conduct, their excavation and their attitude. In closing, I wish to extend thanks and appreciation to the friendly states that rejected the misuse and abuse of this council as a tool to harm the interest of my country, its political independence, its security and stability. If we are optimistic about this council, it is due to the fact that we continue to hear the voice of the wise echoing on this council, a voice that calls for extending a hand to Syria to face up to the difficulties and to encourage the Syrian government to push ahead with the reforms and to call on the external opposition to enter into a comprehensive dialogue so as to build Syria, a Syria for all our citizens without any pretext, without any exception. I thank you, Madam.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic for his statement. There are no more names on the list of speakers. The Security Council has thus concluded the present stage of its consideration of the item on its agenda. The meeting is adjourned.